Good to go. Guys, welcome back to P period episode 11. I have a very specific topic that I want to talk to you guys about today. And the narrative of this episode is basically how my training and learning processes have evolved over the years, right? And in doing so, I want to talk to you guys about how I want to basically present the idea to you guys that maybe we should think about how our knowledge base and our fitness is specific to our training and our learning environments, right? So the gist of this episode is basically that you got to understand that you are limited by the amount of knowledge that you have about your training and about your what your subject matter, whatever you think that your expertise lies in, right? I want to bring to light the observation, the realization that um, the knowledge base that you have, and whatever you deem to be your fitness, whatever you identify as your fitness acumen, is always going to be specific to the environment that you have developed this fitness in, and the environment that you have learned your knowledge in, right? So that's basically the topic of discussion today. It's going to be a very small episode. I know I said I'm going to do a 20-minute episode the last time, and then that episode ended up being a 50-minute long episode. Anyway, that's up on Spotify as well. I'm really happy about that. We're back on Spotify as a podcast, so you can just listen to audio versions of all of these episodes from now on. Last episode was it was a very nutrition heavy episode. I was talking about my approach in terms of how I break down my meals, how I approach my meals, and how I approach my protein shakes, right? Different versions, different animations, and anatomy of my protein shakes, how I strip it down to its bare essentials, and how I add the layers back up, kind of depending on the day that I'm having in terms of physical stress and demand. So it was a very important episode to watch because lots of nutritional insights in that episode. So, up on Spotify, that was episode 10. Today we're doing episode 11 and looking at how my training process and learning process has evolved over the years. Right, I've been doing this for a number of years. I have spent enough time now that I have some, measurable data, some qualifiable data that I can bring to you guys, packaged within a couple of insightful anecdotes. So before we get to that, let's just look at what any process of becoming fitter or gaining knowledge looks like, right? There are three main steps that are involved whenever you improve your fitness, like, right, improve your fitness or improve your knowledge base, gain more knowledge and or become more fit, right? First of all, you need an environment. You need an environment where these things are happening, where where these processes can be carried forward, right? So an environment has to be created. An environment is created whenever this process happens, right? Whenever you're becoming fit, the first thing that you do is you create an environment. This is going to happen via joining like a class. Let's say you join a class, you join a gym, right? You join like a CrossFit group training sort of a thing, or you go to a park and you decide to do some body weight calisthenics types of workouts there. Whatever the case may be, there is always an environment that is created first, because that environment is where the growth is going to happen, and that environment is needed for that, right? You cannot gain knowledge by just not doing anything, by just sitting down and not doing anything. And you cannot gain knowledge that way. Neither can you gain fitness that way. And that's going to help us basically form the point that I'm trying to make in later on in the video. The second thing that is going to happen, so in case of gaining fitness, right, that's what you do. You join a class, you join a gym, or you go to a park. In the process of gaining knowledge, the environment is created as well, because you go to, you might watch and listen to your educators or your mentors, or you might consume content online. You might pick up books and read and learn from them. You might join classes. You might want to do, seminars or lectures or certifications. Whatever you do, it's an environment that you're creating first, where all of the learning is going to happen, right? The second thing that happens is that affordances in that environment, the environment that you create, will provide you the opportunity to make the adaptations, right? For example, let's say if you go to the gym, then the affordances that are created by the barbells, by the dumbbells, by the kettlebells, by all of the lifting equipment, is going to afford you the opportunity to lift weights, right? Weight lifting is only made possible because it is afforded to you by the physical attributes of what a dumbbell looks like, or how you can hold or carry or use the dumbbell, right? Or how a barbell looks like, or what you can do with a barbell. Physical attributes of a barbell is what allows you to lift the barbell in a certain way. So you got to think about that, right? It's not just about create. When you create an environment, you put entities in there that afford you the opportunity to make the kind of adaptations that you want to be making. In case of education, in case of gaining knowledge, affordances in environment, they provide you the opportunity to make the adaptations. What happens is you pick up a book, the book is going to afford you the opportunity to perceive information. Then in your mind, you make interpretations, right? And then you start developing and forming a knowledge base. Then what's going to happen is that you're going to make some adaptations, because this is a process of growth in both cases. Whenever whether you're becoming a fitter version of yourself, or whether you're becoming a more knowledgeable version of yourself, it's an incremental, positive incremental process, right? You're making increment in the positive direction. And for that to happen, you're basically adapting. You're adapting into a more able, more knowledgeable version of yourself. But what are these adaptations? These adaptations are not general, objective, like this is what happens to you when you become fit, or this defines what being knowledgeable means, right? It doesn't happen that way. The adaptations that you do make are always going to be specific to the affordances that are present in your environment, if that makes sense. For example, let's compare a couple of guys. Let's just say, we'll feel we're comparing a couple of strong fellows, right? A couple of strong guys. One of these guys is strong. One of these guys we picked from a powerlifting setting, right? He's a powerlifter. And let's say the other guy is just like a farm boy, right? He's got that farm boy strength. So we have already established that both of these guys are strong in their own accord. We've seen one guy lift like, more than 250, 300 kilos in the gym, kgs in the gym. We've seen the other guy carry 100, 200 kilos on his back every single day on the farm, right? So in their own rights, these are both strong people. But just because they are strong, um, can we expect the farm boy to be able to do a deadlift? Or can we expect the powerlifter to do what the farm boy does in his job every single day? We cannot. Why? Because it's not just about strength. The kind of adaptations that they have made, the kind of strength, although both of them are strong, they've both arrived at sort of like the same quality, physical quality, right? That they have a lot of strength. But those strength adaptations are specific to the affordances that were present in their environment. So the farm boy is not only strong, the farm boy is also adapted to the kind of work that he does. The deadlifter, the power lifter is not only strong, he's also adapted to kind of like the skill work that he does with the barbell, right? Because deadlifting is not just about strength, it's an activity. It's kind of like a motor skill. It's a skill, it's a physical skill that you do, and it's afforded to you because of the way the barbell is built. So uh, you know, without the way that without the affordances that barbells and dumbbells and kettlebells and these weights have, there would be no deadlifting, right? Deadlifting is afforded to you only because of the way dumbbells or barbells or whatever you deadlift with is built. Because of the physical attributes of those equipment, you are afforded the opportunity to learn how to deadlift. So without those, there would be no deadlifting. Without those specific affordances, there would be no deadlift specific adaptations, if that makes sense, right? So that's what you got to know, that adaptations that you make, these are not general adaptations, right? You don't just become fit. You make adaptations that are specific to the affordances that you decide to either place in your environment, or where whether or unknowingly the affordances that are present in your environment, right? So but you got to notice that. So what's the pattern that you notice in both of these cases, right? In the process of becoming fitter and in the process of gaining knowledge, you'll notice that it sort of follows like the same cascade of events. There has to be an environment where all of this is happening. The environment has to be rich with affordances that afford you the opportunity to make the adaptations that you want to be making. And then you got to understand that whatever adaptations that you make are not going to be general, they're going to be specific to the environment, they're going to be specific to the affordances in your environment that you create, right? The adaptations that you make will be specific to what is afforded by your environment. So that just goes to show that now you can start to observe that your growth in fitness, right? Your When you improve your fitness, whatever growth you make, whatever adaptations basically that you make will be specific to your training environment, right? So if you're out in the park doing calisthenics, you will become fit, but your adaptations, your fitness adaptations, your physical ability adaptations is going to be specific to the kind of workouts that you're doing, right? Your knowledge base will be specific to your learning environment. You're limited by what you know. You at any given point, you can only know what you know. That's something to think about, right? Why am I mentioning these things again and again? That's what I've written down next, because you guys need to understand that, and this is sort of like the most important realization that I've come to, that has helped me, that has been like a singularity event where, before realizing this, I was limited to the frames of thought that I was stuck within. And after realizing this, I have been able to build a framework where I'm able to, very gain more knowledge and become more fit and evolve my training methods and learning methods in a way that allows for sustainable progress, right? In a way that's very fluid and very adaptive, right? So you got to understand that unified definition of fitness doesn't exist, right? If you were to bring up and make an award for the fittest person on the planet, that award would be, for the most part, you know built on a lot of fallacies. I think the CrossFit guys do that. They do the fittest person of the year award or something like that. And whoever is the winner of the CrossFit games is like the fittest person of the year. Although they are doing a whole bunch of things, like it might seem like they're doing a whole variety of things, but they are only adapted to doing a certain or thriving under certain conditions, right? You cannot say that that is the unified definition of what fitness is. It cannot exist, because the adaptations that you make, whatever you deem to be fitness, right? Let's say you're doing really good in some aspect of training, whatever kind of training that you're doing really good, and you say that I am the fittest because I can do all of these things. But even then, you are going to be limited by the adaptations that you make, because your adaptations are specific to what is afforded by your environment, what is afforded to you by your environment, right? So a calisthenics person, in their own accord, they deem themselves to be really fit. A powerlifter, a CrossFit guy, in their own accord, they deem themselves to be really fit, right? But their definitions of fitness are worlds apart, right? There is no unified definition of fitness. They are fit to do the kind of activity that they have been learning to do. The environment, which is dictated majorly by the environment that they're learning in, and the affordance is present in their environment. So that's how it differs. You can only be fit enough to do what you're learning to do. In terms of knowledge, in terms of gaining knowledge, you got to understand, very similar to fitness, like how unified definition of fitness doesn't exist, true expertise cannot exist. True general expertise of everything cannot exist. You can only know what you know, and there is simply too much to know. And whenever it comes to knowledge, there's just so much to know. There's just so much information out there that can be absorbed, that it's seemingly impossible to gain true expertise, true general expertise, right? It doesn't exist. You are always going to be limited by, number one, your learning environment, number two, the affordances present in your learning environment, right? Let's now, once we understand that, now let's take a look at my journey. Take a look at how my training and my learning has evolved over the years. And we'll take that as an example. So I just want to talk to you guys about a few key features of this journey, right? 2014 to 2022, that's how long I've been training in and out of the gym, right? I guess 2014, that's back when I was in the 12th grade. I was just finishing 11th grade. I did some training in the 11th grade as well, but we can count that. But 2014 is just like 12th graders is where it really started taking off for me. And it's been what, 2014 to 2022, it's been close to 8 years now. That feels unreal right now. I didn't realize that was the case, but yeah, few features of this journey through these 8 years, 7 8 years. At all times, I have believed what I knew to be the ultimate truth. Whatever I knew at that point of time, I felt like that was the ultimate truth. And I realized, and I know a lot of you will relate to this as well. We come from, as fitness coaches, as interested trainees, we come from a lot of different backgrounds. You might have come up in the CrossFit background, you might have come up in like a weightlifting background, you might have come up in like a yoga sort of a background, right? Rehab setting, whatever that is. It's very easy to fall prey to this kind of thinking where you think that the kind of information that you have is very ahead of the curve, and you know something that others don't, and what your kind of knowledge and your kind of training method is superior to others, right? But that was before we realized that whatever we know is specific to our learning and our training environment, and hence we are limited by that. Knowingly or unknowingly, we are limited by the amount of knowledge that we have, and there's just simply so much to learn that you can never have true general expertise or true general unified fitness, right? So that was before that. Before I knew that, before I realized that to be true, right? I thought that whatever I knew throughout this journey, at different points I knew different things, right? Like I've written on the second point, jumped from one camp to another, one camp, one school of thought to another for multiple years with the same core belief, right? Core belief changed multiple times. So what would happen is I would make a lot of 360-degree pivots where I would, I would be fan of a certain kind of training, right? I would consume a certain kind of content, and my training would be based on kind of the content, kind of the learning that I was subjected to, that I was subjecting myself to. And whenever new pieces of information came in, something that blew my mind completely, I would completely change my point of view, and I would ditch whatever it is that I was doing, whatever I was making progress with, to basically, jump ship and start doing the next best thing, whatever was trendy back then. So that happened a lot. And all of this was basically happening because I did not have a system, right? I did not have a system for incremental evolution of my methods and my systems. So let's say I've been doing exactly what I said. I've been doing something for 3-4 months, right? Which I know to be true, which I'm really invested in emotionally, mentally, physically, and everything. Come across a new piece of information the next day, really start believing in that, really start buying into that system of belief, and then I'm just going to completely make a 360-degree pivot, ditch whatever I'm doing and start doing that, right? So just because I did not have a system where I could continue doing what I was doing, and I could slowly, incrementally try out the new things that I want to try, put it within there without having to make those big pivots, without having to start from scratch. I had none of those, right? I did not have those systems. I did not have have that framework with me. So these are some key features that have been present throughout my journey of evolution of my training and my learning process. So let's look at it. So what I've done here is I've written on my how my training has evolved over the years, and similarly I've written on the kind of content. So this is my training environment and this is my learning environment. And through this, I just basically want to show you guys how my learning environment was sort of influencing my training environment, right? And this is how you can understand where the limitations of your knowledge lie. So if you see 2013 to 2015, like any other guy that started as a teenager back then, it was all bodybuilding centric. Most of the content out here around me was very bodybuilding, powerlifting centric, right? That was what I was doing: a bunch of push pull legs workouts, a bunch of back and buys, chest and tries, legs and shoulders type of a deal. And that was very. Now that I look back at it in hindsight, it's very predictable because the content, at the same time, the kind of content that I was viewing, my learning environment was limited to fitness influencer videos on YouTube, right? So I was consuming a lot of Rob Lipset, a lot of Alpha Elite vlogs, and those guys were all about power building, right? They were powerlifting, they were bodybuilding, they were eating just appealing food, and they had this appealing lifestyle, and that was what I was invested into. That's where I learned the macronutrient calculation. That's where I learned what a caloric surplus, what a deficit is. That's where I learned, got to know about summer shredding and cutting and bulking cycles and whatnot. And it felt like the ultimate truth to me. It felt like I had cracked the code back then, right? And that was what I was emotionally, physically, and mentally invested into for the better part of 2 years, right? 2015, it was like the year after my 12th grade. I took a drop year that year to prepare for the army entrance examinations, and that was like the year when I started doing CrossFit. And at the same time, I also started getting into long distance running a lot. I did my fast for first half marathon. I was viewing a lot of Casey Neistat videos on YouTube, and I was very fired up to do those long distance runs and get into ultra endurance and whatnot. And I was doing CrossFit as well. At the same time, my learning environment was my CrossFit classes and the YouTube influencer videos, right? So my learning environment changed, and it was limited by my CrossFit class. So I would go to my CrossFit class. That was my training environment. And that is where I gained my knowledge as well, right? I would learn from the coaches there. I would learn from just being there within the class, looking at other people, working with the bars, working with the equipment, learning those lifts, right? Went through all of that, and that was what my learning environment was limited to, and that is how it affected my training environment as well. So 2015 to 2018 heavily was CrossFit and all long distance running. 2018 is where when my college education ended, right? That's where when I decided to end my college education and just jump head first into chaos, right? So 2018 is where I was not doing CrossFit anymore. Like I was done with that. I was just training by myself along with my girlfriend. And in terms of my learning environment, since I had, this was the time when I had a lot of time to myself, when I had the opportunity to have independent thought. And when I started fanning that flame, right? When I started feeding my curiosity. So I would just be, it was just very random, right? It was a period of experiments. It was a period of lots of experiments. And this was also when my injuries were starting to catch up with me, right? Old injuries that obviously weren't taken care of because I did not have a structured approach. And I was doing all of these things where I was, by 2018, I was already a very, I would say, seasoned long distance runner. Like I had a huge aerobic capacity. I had done some long races. I had performed really well in a couple of races. I was doing CrossFit and all workouts were just this CrossFit heavy workouts. So all of that without knowing what you're doing, without having a structure, and if you're exposing your body to that amount of stress, that's a lot of stress. And if you're not taking care of your injuries, they're just going to build up, right? They're going to keep building up to a point where they start creating restrictions for you. So that's what happened with me. So this period was very injury rehab specific, right? I was very curious about how do I work with these injuries and how do I mix that along with training. And it was all experiments with periodizing my training in different ways. So at one point, I know I had this very experimental weekly split of training, where I would call it power, strength, and conditioning days, right? So I was day one would just be lots of power type of explosive workouts. Day two would be a lot of strength workouts. Day three would be a lot of conditioning core type of a thing, and then I would repeat it a couple of times in a week, right? Monday through Wednesday and Thursday through Friday. And along with this, I was running and all as well. So I really didn't have a structure. It was a lot of haphazard, concurrent, random training being done together, and which was basically reflective of my learning environment, which was just basically a lot of random web searches. I had not created, trustworthy resources of information till by that point, and that's basically what was going on. Come 2022, 2020, right on late 2019 is when I started working professionally. When I entered the field professionally, right? I was helping out a lot of people and building training programs for a lot of people around me and online before that as well. But that was all free work. That was all just work out of curiosity and just, just as passion projects. It was just something that I like to do. It's something that I like to do right now. Right now as well. I take a lot of my time out for a lot of people and just help them out just because I want to, just because I like having those conversations, talking shop with people. But back then I was doing it a lot. 2019 is when I got the opportunity to start, you know, do like a quick apprenticeship or internship sort of a thing and get working. 2020 is when like the COVID thing, coronavirus pandemic started. And this was the time when, let's look at my learning environment at this point. At this point is when the limits of my learning environment sort of increased, right? It was like a singularity event. Me starting work professionally was like this singularity event, because basically this is when the sources from where I was getting my information, right? This is when the affordances in my learning environment increased. Before that, the affordances were just singular in nature. 2013 to 2015, whatever knowledge I had was afforded through YouTube videos, right? 2015 to 2018, whatever knowledge I had was afforded to me from, again, YouTube videos and the CrossFit class that I went to. 2018 to 2020 was web searches, random web searches, right? With no framework, no structure. 2020, when I started working, this the resources that I had available to me, the sources that I had available to me, basically, they exploded. So after this point, I had colleagues that I could learn from. I had mentors that I could learn from. I had my own work that I could take anecdotes out from. Right, I had online resources by this point. I had established a few, reliable resources by this point. But again, even though I had all of these things going on for me, I was still limited by my knowledge base because it was specific to my colleagues. It was specific to the kind of people that I was working with, where I was working, my workspace. It was, it was specific and limited by the online resources that I deemed as reliable, right? So, and this is when I was experimenting with a lot of strength and conditioning, because that was all reflective of my work, which was basically a strength and conditioning setting. The conversations were very strength and conditioning heavy, and the strength and conditioning was this buzzword back then, which strength and conditioning is what we essentially do, as what I essentially do as like a coach for myself as well. And it's like a blanket term, but I guess I haven't used that term in a long time now. For the last 2 years, I don't think I have used strength and conditioning anywhere. But this is when I identified my work as strength and conditioning, and I was doing experiments with a lot of strength and conditioning style workouts. So 2020 to 2021, my workouts were still had this CrossFit influence, lingering CrossFit influence. My workouts were very, you know they were very, I would say, circuit format, like lots of high intensity circuits. So I had this element of lingering CrossFit element as well, and lots of experimenting going on with strength and conditioning workouts, periodizing workouts and whatnot. And 2022, fast forward to right now, after doing all of this, after being through all of this, right? I've done bodybuilding, powerlifting type of workouts for a couple of years. I've done CrossFit, I've done endurance sports, I've done strength and conditioning, I've done experimenting with injury rehab and whatnot. And in terms of learning, I've had YouTube videos that I've learned from extensively, that I've combed through. I've done classes here and there. I've done my own random web searches. I've learned from colleagues, my work, physical work, real physical work, online resources that I deemed as trustworthy and whatnot. All of this led, come fast forward to 2022, I now have a workable framework, right? A framework that I can deploy, that's based on a few core principles that are always going to be there. And at the same time, the framework also has the flexibility and the adaptability to take in new information, to input and apply use of new information, and conduct experiments, and basically whatever I pass to be, whatever I pass as something that I can add into my framework, I do that, right? So I have that framework with me right now, and which is basically reflective of what my learning environment right now is as well. So as of 2022, I have methodical study sessions. I have books that I read. I have my own resources. I have my work, and I have my experimentations. So right now, the affordances that I have in my learning environment are a lot, and the affordances in my training environment is a reflection of my learning environment, because I have been able to apply whatever I've learned into my own context, to my own practice, whenever I'm training people, to whenever I'm training myself. I have a framework that I can rely on right now, right? So that's been my journey for the last few years, and it's all about how how I've been at different times, how I've been limited by what I knew at that point, and how my training was a reflection of my learning, right? So let's talk about what's the cost of ignorance, right? Why are we bothered about all of this? Why do we need frameworks? Why can't we just be a happy CrossFitter? Why can't we just be a happy powerlifter, right? Um, all right. So you know, um, what's the cost of ignorance, right? So why do we want to learn all of these things? The cost of ignorance is that, knowingly or unknowingly, let's say you're a coach, you've spent the last 8 years like me, 7, 8 years doing different things, just trying out a bunch of things. And that happens to everybody. If we do not have a framework, if we are not cognizant of what's happening, we are going to be, if we cannot identify a frame of thought, we are going to be stuck within that frame of thought inevitably, right? Because if you do not know a way out, that's me that you do not know a way out, right? You cannot go out. So you have to, if the only way to get out of a frame of thought is to know the way out, is to know that bigger things exist, is to know that other things exist out of it. So if you never know that, and you're just mindlessly jumping from, whatever is whatever was trendy back then to whatever is trendy right now, and let's say you've been doing that for a few years, then you're going to come at a point where you will have, you will just have this, you will have a whole bunch of different kinds of information in your mind. And you have also gone through times where at different times you believed every single piece of those information to be true, to be the ultimate truth, right? So now that you've got like 5 different things that you deem to be true, so how do you know what is true? Ambiguity and confusion is going to increase as the data inputs increase, right? As the amount of knowledge that you have is going to increase over the years, of course, because you're going to experience different things, you're going to gain knowledge, you're going to retain knowledge. And whenever that happens and you do not have a framework for, understanding these things, the ambiguity is going to increase, confusion is going to increase. And you're going to come at a point where you're going to be caught by paralysis by analysis, which is like the new buzzword, right? Lots of people like to say paralysis by analysis. I like to say paralysis by analysis. That's why I've written down paralysis by analysis here. But paralysis by analysis is often looked at as this thing that just happens to you, where you're just people will advocate against being paralyzed by analysis too much. Like, just don't think about it that much, and just don't think about it that much, and just do what needs to be done. Do not get paralyzed by analyzing things too much. You do not need to think that much. That's really not the case. My take on this is that you are going to be caught by paralysis by analysis whenever you do not have a framework to understand something. So when are we paralyzed by analysis? Let's say we have a couple of 3, 4 decisions that we have to make that's in front of us, and we are confused by what decision to make, right? We are paralyzed. That can only arise when you do not have a framework for assessing which is the best decision to make, right? So whenever you arrive at a point where you're paralyzed by your own analysis, it's not a cue to stop thinking and just make a decision based on intuition alone. It's a cue to basically improve your learning base, improve your knowledge base, and uh, you know come up with a framework that allows you to make those decisions, that allows you to go, not run away or back from that point where you're paralyzed by your analysis, but go forward, go deeper, you right, go ahead with the analysis, right? So you just need frameworks. That's all this is. So just as an example, let's say you as a coach or as a trainee, you've been somebody who's done a bunch of CrossFit, who's done a bunch of Olympic lifting, and then you've done a bunch of strength and conditioning type of things as well. So CrossFit, when you did CrossFit, you learned all of these different Olympic lifts, and everybody was going on about the beauty and the importance and the value of Olympic lifts. But when you come to a strength and conditioning heavy community where it's all about efficacy and effectiveness and what's more efficient and what's not, and the strength and conditioning community right now is of the opinion that Olympic lifts are obsolete, and just because of the huge learning curve, maybe it's not the best decision to make in a group training setting where you can be spending time. What they want to tell you is that you can be spending time on other things than doing like a whole bunch of classes just to teach people how to do Olympic lifts so that you can work on your power and whatnot. There are other ways to get that same adaptation, other ways to improve power, other ways to improve your rate of force development, and all of these things, right? So at one hand, you had this experience of CrossFit that preaches Olympic lifts. On one hand, you've had this experience in the strength and conditioning community that is sort of moving away from the idea of Olympic lifts. So what is true? What do you do? What do you follow? Right? You're at a point where it's ambiguous. You're confused. You're paralyzed. You're caught by paralysis by analysis. But if you had a framework, right? If you had a framework for understanding what needs to be done, then all this paralysis by analysis wouldn't happen, right? You just need a framework to make better decisions. So all of this leads to inconsistency in practice as well, right? You apply one thing today, you try to apply another thing tomorrow. The person that you're working with is like, bro, you told me this is what we're going to do today, and just right now you're like, we're not doing that, we're doing this. What's that about? You tell them, okay, it's just this new thing that I learned over the internet that sounds kind of sus, that sounds kind of shady, and it's very inconsistent. It's going to lead to a lot of inconsistency in your practice, in your interaction with other people. So that's the cost of ignorance. That's the cost of saying that, all of this knowledge is not for me. I can, you can also train. You do not need to retain that much information for just something as simple as training. No, it's not the case. Whenever it's anything science related, you owe it to yourself to always improve your knowledge base, to always improve your, better your learning environment, and make it richer of affordances that basically afford you the opportunity to make that growth in your knowledge base. So that's the cost of ignorance. Now, how do we create an authentic framework for growth? Lots of points written down here. Lots of points written down here. Okay, let's get back to it. Okay, so how do we create an authentic framework for growth? We first of all, yeah. So we got to identify affordances in your learning environment, right? How is your knowledge and fitness being afforded to you? So at any given point of time, you believe in a process, right? You believe in a type of training. You believe in whatever knowledge that you have. The first thing that you need to do is you need to identify how you are afforded that knowledge, right? How do you know what you know? How have you come to know what you know? What are your sources of information? Where have you learned all of these things from? Lots of times you'll just realize that a bunch of things that you know is just hearsay, right? It's just something that you heard somebody else say. They did not have a strong basis for it, but they just had a convincing pitch. You were convinced and you started, at one point I was, I had this conversation with this fitness influencer that had come down to the space that I was working in. And this guy was going on about how, doing pull-ups before your bench presses is what primes you up for your bench presses a lot, just because of the way the the scapula moves, which right now I understand to be a bunch of horseshit. But back then I was very intrigued, I was just very engrossed and I was sold. I was sold by that point. I was really, really curious to know more from that guy. And I just felt like the guy knew so much. But but later on I realized that I thought about, how do I know that I thought to myself that how do I know that pull-ups is a good warm-up for bench pressing? Then I realized that that piece of information just comes to me from just by listening to somebody else. It was just hearsay. And I did not bother to understand where that guy, got their information from. So I had no idea of knowing how that knowledge was afforded to me. It was just afforded to me. That piece of information was afforded to me from a guy talking to me, right? That's just it, from a conversation, from hearsay. Now that I know about anatomy, now that I know about motion of bones and everything, how the scapula works, the kind of range of motion that's afforded to the scapula, how it differs from when you're doing a pull up to when you're doing a bench press, all of these different things. Now I understand that. Now that my knowledge base is different, now I can easily understand that that was a load of crap, whatever that guy told me, right? But back then I did not know, because I was limited by my knowledge base. So you always need to know. Whenever you will hear a bunch of things, you will hear people say a bunch of things to you, right? But whenever that happens, whenever new piece of information comes in, you need to identify how it was afforded to you, right? Where is the source? What is the source? How authentic is the source? How do you know what you know? That's the first thing that you got to do. Once you do that, you just need to find better affordances that are aligned with your learning objective. So whenever you're training, whenever you're learning, you just always need to have like an umbrella objective that you're working towards, right? Which you can, around which you can base your entire framework. When you have that sorted, you need to find better affordances. You need to find better sources of information. You need to find better affordances that afford you opportunities that are more aligned with your learning or your training objective, right? So once you identify your sources and you deem them to be authentic or not authentic, then it's all about finding better affordances over the ones that are not that good, right? So that's that. You're just basically refining your training environment or your learning environment so that the efficiency of the whole process improves. As an example, if you want to train professional athletes, Learning about physiology, neurology, relative motion, goal-oriented programming, etc., will be a better route than just getting like a CrossFit level 1 certification, right? So you have identified that my objective as a coach is that I'm going to go ahead and train professional athletes. And then you go and do like a CrossFit level 1 certification, and then you're making athletes do CrossFit, right? And you're saying that you're preparing CrossFits for these people for professional sports. Does that make sense, or would it make sense to go and learn about exercise physiology, go and learn about neurobiology, neurology, which is like a heavy component of athlete development, learn about relative motion, learn about, anatomy, musculoskeletal system, learn about how goal oriented programming is done, and then approach professional athletes, create a framework, and then start training them? What would make sense, right? So uh, you know even if you make professional athletes do CrossFit workouts, they will make some kind of adaptations. And if you make them do workouts that's based on a framework that you've created by gaining all of these knowledge in these different fields that I've mentioned here, they're going to make some adaptations as well. But you just need to know what are you working towards. So once you identify your learning objective, okay, I want these athletes to show up to their professional sporting event in peak shape, right? I want them show up for ready for peak performance. So once you identify that objective, choose better affordances, right? Choose better options. In this case, you would obviously go over that whole learning process of different subjects rather than just taking like a CrossFit certification, right? I got stuck within that same frame of thought when I was in this strength and conditioning setting, working at a gym, working at like a fitness studio, and I was very convinced that I wanted to get an animal flow certification. I might have been sold on a pitch or like a marketing thing that I must have seen online somewhere, but I just wanted to get this animal flow certification so bad, and back then it just made sense to me. But now I realize that it would not have been the better choice. It would not have been the better affordance to put in my training environment, right? Just spending 2-3 months learning animal flow, would that have been more beneficial to my learning process, or was, picking up books, building resources, building frameworks more beneficial to my learning process? Obviously, the latter is more beneficial to me, right? You got to understand that adaptability is the name of the game. So have a framework that allows you to take new inputs and build upon your existing base without having to make huge pivots and start fresh every time you take in new mind-blowing information. So I've already talked about this. You need to build a framework, and that framework needs to be adaptable, right? So the importance of having a framework, having an authentic framework or a system, is that whenever a new piece of information comes in, and it has to come in, it will come in, because that's how you grow as a professional. Whenever that happens, you shouldn't have to completely ditch whatever that is you were doing and just, change to something new. That happened a lot of times with me, and that was really frustrating, right? You could notice that happening, and it was really frustrating. But to avoid that from happening, you need to have a framework that's adaptable, that's flexible, that allows for, new information to come in and have a place within the framework, within the existing base, within the existing style of operations, within the existing style of doing things, right? Some tools that help is going to be, always plan mesocycles in advance. So like, let's say you're preparing a training plan for one of your clients or for yourself, based on the kind of like the information that you have as of today. Plan an entire mesocycle, right? Plan 3-4 weeks already, so that you do not, so that when you, let's say, you're learning every single day, right? Let's say you plan today's workout, you just went out and did something. You learn something tomorrow, the next day the workout is a completely different workout. You learn something the next week, you're doing something else entirely different that week, right? So if you keep doing this, are we building consistency in any one of those verticals? We're not. We're just doing a whole bunch of random things, and making progress that way is going to be very difficult, especially if you're a seasoned trainee, right? Especially if you're very accommodated to the kind of training that you're doing, right? New people, new beginners, new trainees can get away by doing anything. They can make a lot of progress by doing anything. Those are the golden years of training. We'll talk about that in a different episode. That's like a completely different topic to talk about. But if you're a seasoned trainee, you got to understand that you are not going to make progress by doing just a bunch of different things. And that's, I think, a lot of people get stuck within that, right? A lot of people, we are always, all of us, we are always inclined to learn. We are always learning. We are always curious to learn. But sometimes what happens is we also do not plan 4 weeks of our training ahead of time, right? We just go out and do a workout that we want to do based on a bunch of things that we learned or absorbed or perceived that particular day from the online, from the internet, books or whatever. And the next day we will go and do a workout based on the new information that we gain. So when you do things like that, when you do not have your mesocycles planned 3-4 weeks planned in advance, you're going to fall it's going to be very easy to fall prey to randomness, and it'll be very easy to not make any progress. But when you have your mesocycles planned, you know that irrespective of anything, I decided the amount of the knowledge base, the framework that I have had at that point to be true and effective. And based on that framework, based on that knowledge base, I built this 4 weeks of training in advance. Now I'm going to go through this 4 weeks of training, and then maybe I can build something else, refine my training process depending on the new information that I've got coming in, which I'll put in 4 weeks later, right after I'm done with this block. So that's how planning mesocycles in advance helps. Journaling always helps, because how can you know all of this if you never if you need to have a picture in front of yourself. And in that sense, journaling always helps. Like, eyeballing things can only get you so far, right? It doesn't always help. And to be able to eyeball things, you first need to have a quantifiable approach. So in terms of quantifying things, having a clear picture in front of you, journaling, writing things down, having a log of what you're doing or not doing is always going to help. Create systemic protocols, right? Dedicated study hours, experimentations. This is like a system that I just discussed with you guys, that you plan your training 4 weeks in advance. And whenever new pieces of information comes in, tell yourself that the protocol is that I will finish that. I have decided and I have identified whatever I know to be effective and true. Based on that, I have formed 4 weeks of training, planned 4 weeks of training. So even if new information is coming in, I am going to complete these 4 weeks, and then I'm going to the new input, put in the new input, and make my way forward from there. So that's like a systemic protocol that I have built for myself, right? Have dedicated study hours. Do not let this thing be random. Do not let this thing be, reading this thing of the internet today, that blog post of the internet today, that post from the person that I follow tomorrow. Those things can only take you so far. So you got to have dedicated study hours where you're making incremental progress, right? Where you pick a topic of this thing that you're doing, and you're seeing it through. It's harder, it's easier said than done, but that's what you got to do. Like right now, I have started this textbook, which is basically called risk assessment and decision analysis based on Bayesian networks. It's basically it's a book that I believe is going to help me take my skill set to a whole another level. It's like a 600-page textbook, based around the subject of statistics and risk assessment and whatnot. But now I have dedicated study hours every single day, on a regular basis, until I finish this textbook. After which point I can take all of that data, compress it into something, make something out of it that I can then use as a lens and look at my training, look at my field of work, right? But for all of that to happen, I need my dedicated study hours. I need my journaling to be there. I need my systemic protocols to be there. I need my experimentations to be there. These are tools that always help. The general theme of all of our episodes is that we will always try to build solutions and not look for answers, because whenever you're looking for answers, you're making it very specific, right? You're narrowing the focus down, and whenever you're going towards specificity, you're always going away from a general approach, right? So that way, when we have frameworks, when we have this systemic way of doing things, we try to build solutions instead of looking for answers or giving people specific answers. How do you lose weight? How do I lose weight, coach? You're not going to lose. I do not give you 3 answers for that. Do this exercise, eat that food, and take this supplement, and you lose weight. No, I will not do that. First, I will form a framework, right? Where are you at right now? I will take some pieces of information from the person, try to form, to basically get a bunch of data that I can start analyzing, objective data, like what's their, body proportions, what's their height, weight, and all of these things. I'm going to take subjective data, what kind of state of mind they are in right now, where are they coming from, what kind of experience they have had with training and eating, what kind of lifestyle do they lead, what are the goals that they have in mind. I'm going to take in the subjective forms of data, I'm going to take in the objective forms of data, I'm going to apply my knowledge base to it, right? whatever I've learned, I'm going to apply that knowledge base to it, and then I'm going to come up with a solution that we can work on, that we can try out. And when that doesn't work out, I have solution number two, solution number three, right? And that's how we make our way forward. So I do not give them an answer, but I try to build a solution for them. That's what you got to do, right? Have a first principles based approach where you're looking for solution, where you're finding trailblazing a way forward instead of giving specific answers, right? That always begins with the first thing that I've said. How do you know what you know? You at all every single point of time, with every single thing uh, that you try to solve, you got to start with asking yourself, the knowledge base that you're applying to solve that problem, where is that knowledge base coming from? Is it a bunch of hearsay, right? Somebody wants to lose fat, you're a coach, somebody else told you that apple cider vinegar is going to help them lose fat, you say that to the person, right? Are you going that route, or are you going through a route where you know where you gain, you know where your knowledge around losing weight is coming from, you deem that source to be authentic, and that's where you're pulling your knowledge from and applying it to this person to find a solution for them, right? So in a general sense, just have a broad and generalized scope of learning, and have a specific and contextual scope of application. So create an learning environment where there are lots of affordances present, that are lots of learning opportunities, general learning opportunities are being presented to you. So just as an example, I talked about that book that I'm reading right now, which is based around risk assessment, which is a subject of statistics, right? I've been doing my education in the field of ecology as well, learning all of these different ecological concepts. So my scope of learning is very generalized, and it's not just specific to exercise science. It's not just specific to training, because if it was, I would not have been able to basically apply the kind of nuance and kind of context that I want to be applying to finding specific solutions for different people and myself. So specificity is only going to be made possible when you have a generalized and a huge scope of learning. If your scope of learning is very specific, your application of that knowledge is going to be even more specific. So we need to have a broad and generalized scope of training so that we can have a specific and contextual scope of application, if that makes sense. That's how you have an effective framework for growth, right? Three questions. I'm going to end this by giving you guys three questions that you need to ask often. You need, how do I know what I know? That's like one of the most important questions. How is my effort aligned to my objective, right? So this should basically promote the thought that you need, at all times, you need to be thinking about what is my objective here? What is it that I'm trying to do, right? That is going to help you narrow your approach of application. Like I mentioned in the last point here, specific and contextual scope of application. You can only specify the context if you know what you're working towards. So you need to know your objective, and then you need to understand how your effort is aligned to your objective, right? So it's about picking better affordances, like I've mentioned in the second point here, right? Pick better affordances, make sure that the affordances, the opportunities of growth that are afforded to you, that you're placing in your learning or training environment, are aligned with your objectives. They're not just a bunch of random things, but they're actually aligned with your objective. Coming back to the professional athlete example, if your objective is training professional athletes, don't just make them do a bunch of random things. You know, create affordances for them that are aligned with the objective, aligned with improving their, whatever it is that you're doing with athletes. Always ask yourself, how am I gauging progress? Come up with your own value systems, right? And this, I think, this I feel like is like a topic for another episode, so we'll get into this later on. But yeah, that's it for today. Big point to be made here is that your learning and your training is always going to be specific to your learning and training environment and the affordances that are present in that environment. And you can only know what you know. You're limited by that. So you got to understand that there is no matter how much you feel like the information that you have and the training method that you abide by is the supreme method, it's not, right? It's just something that you do. It's just one specific kind of way of doing things, and there are a whole bunch of other things that you can be doing. So there is no one true unified definition of fitness. There is no one true unified definition of true expertise. All of it is just specific to your affordances and your training and learning environment. So that was episode 11, guys. You can hear this episode as a listen to this episode as a podcast on Spotify as well. Again, turned out to be a much longer episode than 20 minutes, but I just can't help it. I'll see you guys for the next one. Thank you so much for watching and listening.